So continuing with the modification of the CSS code for the CSS-Designer page, I have loaded up my index page inside the week 4 folder that we have so far. We've done the initial CSS editing. I'm going to look at I'm right clicking on the page and I'm going to take a look at the page source. The page source gives me the HTML that we're familiar with by now. I'm going to click on styles.css here. That's where the CSS sheet is actually located. And I see that, yes, we've done everything for the body that was asked for us in the recipe. So this is already done and has been loaded to the to our GitHub account and our GitHub server. Currently I'm just looking at what's on my drive C locally so I can load it up quickly. Yet my Visual Studio Code, which saves directly there, will show me the code, will show me the CSS, and at any moment I can tell it to upload it to GitHub by committing the file. So moving on to the next thing, I'm going to locate my my eCampus page, and one of these, actually this looks like it's it. You should click on the CSS recipe to open it up. I've already opened it, and we're moving on to the next thing to change, which is going to be the header element, or rather inside the header element we're going to change the H1 selector. And what that means, well, we have maybe 5 things to change. Means that in our Visual Studio Code, inside the styles.css, we already have the body that we have changed some of the coding there. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so that I can see both things if at all possible. I'm going to make this thinner and maybe I can still see it there. Okay, so I'll spring back and forth. The header element inside the H1 selector, if we look at, first of all, if we look at the HTML that we're talking about inside the index.html, this is the page that holds up everything. We've already done the body element that starts on line 8 and it goes all the way to line 51. So everything that we changed in the CSS affects everything within these lines. Starting, everything is inheriting from the body selector, the body element. The next thing we're doing is this little part right here, the header. The header only has one thing inside. It's got a heading 1 that says CSS-Designer, and our job looking at the changes is to make the font size a lot larger, 350%. We're going to change the color to this hexadecimal, which is a reddish color. We're going to set the padding to 40 pixels. That means that everything around the header will push it 40 pixels. And we're going to specifically though change the left padding to 120. That means that something coming in from the left side will be pushing it out of the way. Set the background image to this header image 1 GIF, which is already in our system, and then we're going to tell it to position that background image to the top left, and it should not repeat, kind of like the other one that we did. So some of these things should be a little bit easier. We're going to use some design patterns in that, since we've already typed some of these things and they're going to get repeated, we're just going to copy and paste them. But before we do that, I have to first of all tell it that we're working with the header. And if it were just the header that we're concerned with, I would say header and open up bracket, put in the space, and then anything that happens here will affect the header. Now, since later on we might put some other things in the header besides the H1, and we probably won't, but just think about future projects. We're going to make sure that it's the header, and after the header, put in a space and make sure that H1 is what inherits it, so that if we have any paragraphs, if we have anything else besides the H1, that maybe those would not get affected. So in this middle line now we can start to tinker with the CSS. Set the font size to 350. If I click on the link, it'll show me how this works. Font size is precisely that is the text. I could change it to a pixel size, tell it to be large, small, etc. All the definitions are in the page that opened, and I invite you to read them at some point. For now, just know that we're going to be increasing it in percentage to 350%, so making it real big. So it's going to be font hyphen. I'm going to let Visual Studio kind of catch up and let me see what my choices are. So there's font, etc., 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 and there's a font size right here. So I'll put in the font size that we want, which is going to be 350%. 350 and the percent sign. I'm also now going to close the code, that line anyway, with a semicolon, press enter, and move on to the next one. We're going to set the color to this color. Going to copy the hexadecimal, start side with the hashtag all the way to the 0, and copy it. And we've already done a color change, and we know that it's just color and then a colon and then the name of the color, or in this instance it's going to be the number that it belongs to. So I'm typing in color, putting in the colon, and then pasting, Control V, the reddish color that we selected, and then I'm going to close it with a semicolon. Moving on to the next line, I'm going to set the padding to 40 pixels. You can click on the padding link and learn all about padding inside of W3 Schools. Just know that they show you at the very top, this element, and the element here is this box, has a padding of 70 pixels. So all around 70 pixels are pushing from the top, from the left, from the right, and from the bottom. I really should say that they're pushing from the top, from the right, from the bottom, and from the left, because later on when you work with shortcuts, the way that you distinguish these sides, you start by saying top, right, bottom, left. And there's something about that in this page that you can read. You'll notice here it's top, right, bottom, left, but that's the way that they put it. And then whenever you're doing it all in a shortcut, you just say padding, top, right, bottom, left. So much to cover and learn and discover later, but for now we're going to make it a padding of 40 pixels, which is as simple as, within the H1, just say padding, colon, and give it the number that we're talking about, 40 pixels, semicolon. Next line, we see that we're going to set just the left padding to 120 pixels. So left padding, I want to say it's not left padding, but rather it's going to be padding left. So I'll be sure to change that at some time. If I already changed it and it says paddle left everywhere, that's the correct one. So my padding here will be a padding hyphen left, colon, and we said it was going to be 120 pixels, 120 px. And I should spell padding correctly with 2 D's, and move on to the next line. So now that we have the padding, etc., we have a background image that's going to be header image 1. Now this is where we can do our first copy paste. We've already used the background image on the CSS, so I'm going to copy the background image on top here, this code anyway, right click and copy, and in this space I'm going to right click and paste. Now this would display exactly the same thing, so we don't want that. Instead I'm going to click on the name of it inside the quotes and make sure that it's going to be images slash, and since I'm in Visual Studio Code, it's telling me, oh well, inside of images where you have these things, and the one that we're looking for is header image 1, so that's the very top one. I'll select that one, click, go to the semicolon so that I can press enter, go to the next line. I now am going to change the position. Position has a little bit of a different tune to it, so I click to W3 Schools, and I see that my background position would be colon and then whatever position it is. In the text for W3 Schools, there's going to be multiple things that are going to be told, such as if you have a bottom right, it would be separated just like that. It's going to be a word, a space, and a word. our separation, or rather our position currently, what we want to do is top left. So it's good to know that then we can go back and give it the background hyphen position, and select that, do the colon, and we want it at the top, space, and left, semicolon. Press enter, go to the next line. I think we just have one more thing to do in this block. It should not repeat, which we did previously. It should not. This should not repeat. So I'm going to find that code, no repeat, highlight it, right click, copy, and paste. And I went through that coding fairly quick. I guess I could have stopped at all moments and checked to see what it's looking like. So I can go to File and Save. Control S is your shortcut for a PC. On a Mac it's Command S. I'm going to check the Git control and say, okay, I'm going to commit these files, put in a message that can say added header CSS, and check mark it, and in my contextual menu just say push. Now this is going to go up to the GitHub menu, but I have already loaded up the page locally, so I can load it up. It's in the other browser, in my Chrome browser. I'm going to reload the page and see what happened. Well, there's a couple of errors, and maybe you caught them as I was typing them, but I can see that the CSS-Designer has a margin on top that's way too much. So let's see what the problem was. The padding that I use, I gave it a 40% padding, and it should have been a 40 pixel. So 40% of the page is a lot. I'm going to change the percent sign to px, and I do believe that that should do it. If I save and check it out real quick, then this is a lot better. I see the beginning of our menu here. The CSS-Designer actually looks pretty good because it has this one little image that does not repeat, and it's cradled inside of the space that we gave it in the coding, that 120 pixels. So something that we could have done is on the padding, we could have used a shortcut to say that the padding would be 40 pixels from the top, 40 pixels from the right, 40 pixels from the bottom, and then on the left 120 pixels. You don't have to change it if you already have it in two lines, and padding left, that's fine. I'm going to press Control S to save and reload, and it works fine. So now that that's happened, once again, since I made some changes, I'm going to the source control, telling it to confirm. I'm going to say just changed CSS on padding, and check mark it and tell it to push. And the next time that I go to the GitHub page, which will be maybe 5 minutes from now, but not right now because I'm only reloading the image to check it out, and yours should be okay as well. I'll continue to the next block of code in the next video.